Theory of cognitive development. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist who contributed greatly to the understanding of children's cognitive development. He was born in 1896 and originally trained as a biologist and philosopher. Although he is well known for his work as a psychologist, he also published research on sparrows and mollusks. Piaget's stage theory describes the cognitive development of children. Cognitive development involves changes in cognitive process and abilities. In Piaget's view, early cognitive development involves processes based upon actions and later progresses to changes in mental operations. Schemas are units of understanding. A schema is a pattern of learning, linking perceptions, ideas, and actions to make sense of the world. Piaget described it simply as the way we see the world. For example, a child may have a schema about a type of animal, such as a dog. If the child's sole experience has been with small dogs, a child might believe that all dogs are small, furry, and have 4 legs. According to Piaget, children are born with a very basic mental structure on which all subsequent learning and knowledge are based. Schemas are the basic building blocks of such cognitive models, and enable us to form a mental representation of the world. Adaptation describes how children update their current cognitive organizations and schemas with new information. Adaptation takes place in 2 ways, assimilation and accommodation. The process of taking in new information into our already existing schemas is known as assimilation. The process is somewhat subjective, because we tend to modify experiences and information slightly to fit in with our pre-existing beliefs. In the example above, seeing a dog and labeling it dog is a case of assimilating the animal into the child's dog schema. Another part of adaptation is the ability to change existing schemas in light of new information. This process is known as accommodation. New schemas may also be developed during this process. One classic example of accommodation involves a child who understands that a 4-legged creature is called a dog. Then, the child encounters a cat and refers to it as a dog until corrected by a parent. After being corrected, the child can distinguish between a dog and a cat. As children progress through the stages of cognitive development, it is important to maintain a balance between applying previous knowledge, assimilation, and changing behavior to account for new knowledge, accommodation. Piaget believed that all children try to strike a balance between assimilation and accommodation using a mechanism he called equilibration. Equilibration helps explain how children can move from one stage of thought to the next. Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development suggests that children move through 4 different stages of learning. His theory focuses not only on understanding how children acquire knowledge, but also on understanding the nature of intelligence. Sensorimotor stage is the first phase of children's cognitive development. During this stage, children primarily learn about their environment through their senses and motor activities. The sensorimotor stage comprises 6 sub-stages, where children's behavior moves from being reflex-driven to more abstract. Each sub-stage is described briefly. Use of reflexes. During this stage, children typically use their reflexes. They cannot consolidate information from their sensory organs into a single, unified concept. Primary circular reactions. Children start to consolidate information from different sensory organs. They start to engage in behavior that satisfies the way their body feels or their needs. For example, they repeat pleasurable behaviors, and they adapt their behavior to feed from different objects. They turn to respond to sounds and sights in their environment. Secondary circular reactions. Children's behaviors become more intentional, and the types of behaviors that they repeat expand to include those that result in interesting responses external to their body. For example, they might push buttons on a toy. Children also start to take more interest in their environment. They repeat behaviors that generate interesting responses. Coordination of secondary schemes. At this point, children's behaviors become more goal-oriented, and they can combine different behaviors to achieve goals. Tertiary circular reactions. Instead of performing the same actions, children try new behaviors and actions to achieve different results. These behaviors are not spontaneous or by accident, but are purposeful. Unlike primary and secondary reactions, children can combine more complicated behaviors and even perform a behavior similarly but not the same to get the desired result. Mental combinations. Children start to rely on mental abstractions to solve problems, use gestures and words to communicate, and can pretend. Instead of relying on numerous attempts to solve problems or puzzles, children can deliberate and carefully choose their action. Object permanence involves understanding that items and people still exist even when you can't see or hear them. Object permanence develops when a baby is around 8 months old. According to Piaget's stages of development, object permanence is the main goal for the sensorimotor stage. The preoperational stage. At the end of the sensorimotor stage, children start to use mental abstractions. At the age of 2, children enter the preoperational stage, where their ability to use mental representations, rather than the physical appearance of objects or people, improves greatly. Examples of abstract representations include engaging in pretend play and talking about events that happened in the past or people who are not currently in the room. They also start to understand numbers and quantity, example concepts such as more or bigger. Egocentrism refers to the child's inability to see a situation from another person's point of view. The egocentric child assumes that other people see, hear, and feel exactly the same as the child does. In the developmental theory of Jean Piaget, this is a feature of the preoperational child. Piaget determined that children of this age group lack the concept of conservation or possess an inability to understand that quantities remain constant even when they change shape. A child who cannot conserve will assume the taller glass has more liquid than the shorter glass. The concrete operational stage. While children are still very concrete and literal in their thinking at this point in development, they become much more adept at using logic. The egocentrism of the previous stage begins to disappear as kids become better at thinking about how other people might view a situation. While thinking becomes much more logical during the concrete operational state, it can also be very rigid. Kids at this point in development tend to struggle with abstract and hypothetical concepts. Thinking becomes more logical and organized, but still very concrete. Being able to conserve means knowing that a quantity doesn't change if it's been altered. A child's ability to identify two identical objects as the same, no matter the order, placement, or location. Seriation involves the ability to put things in order based on quantity or magnitude. When we count numbers in order, we are demonstrating our ability to seriate. A mental operation that reverses a sequence of events or restores a changed state of affairs to the original condition. It is exemplified by the ability to realize that a glass of milk poured into a bottle can be poured back into the glass and remain unchanged. During this stage, children also become less egocentric and begin to think about how other people might think and feel. Kids in the concrete operational stage also begin to understand that their thoughts are unique to them and that not everyone else necessarily shares their thoughts, feelings, and opinions. The formal operational stage. The final stage of Piaget's theory involves an increase in logic, the ability to use deductive reasoning, and an understanding of abstract ideas. Piaget used the term metacognition. Metacognition is the knowledge of one's own thoughts and thought processes. The ability to thinking about abstract ideas and situations is the key hallmark of the formal operational stage of cognitive development. The ability to systematically plan for the future and reason about hypothetical situations are also critical abilities that emerge during this stage.